What's cheap is expensive. And I always say prevention is better than cure. And that's one thing that a buyer's agent or a good experienced buyer's agent will be able to guide you through the process and the streets of which are a no-go zone.
Our motto is buy without regrets, and so
if you can buy a property that will serve you for 10 years as opposed to 3 years, that will serve you well. It's something.
buying a great property today, that's not just what it's about. It's also getting something that could be ripe for improvement when the time is right for that investor or for the next buyer.
You think about, right, lifestyle, what's important to you? How do you get to work? What do you need for your family? What amenities like parks and shops? Then you look at the budget.
Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. I'm a mortgage broker since 2013. And in this podcast, we're going to be interviewing Australia's leading buyers agents, ones with decades of experience, have the local insider knowledge on the street, and can really help you with your buying process, no matter whether you're a first home buyer, upgrade, or investor. In this podcast, you'll get access to Australia's leading buyers agents' minds every week on a Thursday. What's the word on the street? Welcome to Street Secrets. Heading back to sort of my hometown, Sydney today, in the studio today with Brady Yoshia from Brady Marcs Buyers Agents. Obviously, we know each other, and before we talk around sort of the upper North Shore and sort of everything that's going on up there, can we just sort of, maybe when did you sort of start as a buyer's agent? When did you come in the industry? What were you doing prior? And sort of tell us a bit more about your journey today.
Sure. So I actually started in the corporate training and development arena in the mobile phone sector. Well, I should say in the telecommunications sector. I was with Optus for quite some time. And having always been entrepreneurial myself, I then had my own mobile phone shops in the city of Sydney when mobile phones were first becoming a thing. So for 10 years, I was in retail. And that gave me a really good insight into customer behaviour patterns. And having said that, property's always been a passion of mine, I should say. And when the time arose, I decided I wanted to become a real estate agent. So I was a selling agent for 5 years and then became a buyer's agent about 15 years ago, of which 5 years I was working for another company, and I founded my own business. So I've really coupled all my skills that I've learned along the way from being in the business arena and having the passion for property, putting them together, and founded my own buyer's agency, Brady Marcs, close to 9 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's no right or wrong coming into buyer's agency, but I do think the sales background, how's that really helped you? And has it always been in Sydney? Like if you worked anywhere else, and how's that really helped you when you sort of made the jump to the other side of the fence?
Such a good question. So yes, I've always worked in Sydney in terms of selling and buying. And for me, being a sales agent really gives you a real understanding of the other side of the equation. But more importantly, the relationships that you build when you are a selling agent with other agents is so important as a buyer's agent, because you need to be able to work with all the sales agents from all different companies. But I worked at McGrath for quite some time, and I was there when the training was phenomenal, and the relationships that I built then, to this day, I work with those agents, and a lot of them are still at McGrath.
Yeah, I think that's sort of long history, sort of survival of the fittest, if anything. I mean, the real estate agent has huge turnover, right? But when you're talking sort of 20 years, and now a lot of those people you were obviously friends with are now running agencies, or they're maybe even buyers agents as well. I know you've got a team, and I know you do buy in different parts of Sydney. I mean, that's a sort of natural evolution. But have you always focused on the upper North Shore or the sort of the northern part of Sydney, sort of, if you go back over the last 20 years?
So predominantly, yes. I'm very passionate about the Upper North Shore. I personally live on the Upper North Shore, but I have worked in the Lower North Shore, Northern Beaches and Eastern Suburbs, because having been in the industry for so many years, you have clients that want you to work in different areas. But the Upper North Shore is an area that I would say I'm an expert in.
Yeah, I think I think that's also awesome that you sort of highlight that, right? Like to actually be a true local expert. It's those years of, going street by street, property by property. But I also think as you get experience that, you do get client briefs that are buying all over the city, and you can sort of, it's good skills to know what's comparatively good value. But the Upper North Shore it's a pretty crazy pocket, right? There's so much old family wealth in that part of Sydney. And when you think about it, how do you break it up like mentally? Like, in terms of the different pockets or the different regions of it, when you're sort of taking clients through their different options if they're exploring that part of Sydney?
Such a good question. So there are so many micro markets in the one big market of the North Shore. So I think first and foremost is to really understand what the client's needs are from a perspective of, do they have a family? Are schools important to them? Are they downsizing? We have a lot of downsizers on the Upper North Shore as well. And so once you've got a clear understanding of what's important to them and what their lifestyle is going to be, and also there are some scenarios where we have first home buyers that are buying apartments on the Upper North Shore, and you really, really want to safeguard them with strata. That's very important, but also understand what their property goals are. So we look at the long-term scenario. So are we buying in an apartment and then in 5 years' time going to be upsizing to a house? So there's no one size fits all. It's about taking them through the motions of where is going to work for them best. And for some people, they're very much driven by schools. Even though they may have only just had a baby, they want to be able to be in a situation where they can get a child into a school, whether it's a public school or a private school. So we're driven by that a lot as well.
Yeah, I mean, the schools is the big draw card, right, of just the choice, and the other parts of the city just haven't got that sort of flexibility, both from single-sex schools to sort of co-ed to sort of public-private. A lot of people gravitate there. The downside is the element to it. And I think you're right. Actually, a lot of first-home buyers are moving. They're having, their first property a lot later. And so, the kids might even be on the way, or they've got one already. But and the downsizer element, is that a lot of people downsizing within the sort of area, just looking something that's a lot less maintenance? Is other part of Sydney that they're wanting to sort of move to the Upper North Shore? How are you finding that element?
So there's a lot of people that want to stay in the area. They might want to move from one suburb to another. But the biggest problem we have on the Upper North Shore is good quality downsizing properties. So what I'm saying is that they are either very small apartments, which do not suit their needs, or the quality of builds aren't quite what they're looking for. So most people that are downsizing that want to stay in the area take a lot longer to sell their homes and find the right property. I feel that it is a market that if a developer really wants to build something unique and do well in, that's a space that they should be looking at, because the downsizers are selling their homes for substantial amounts and they do have the budget to spend on a good quality build.
Yeah, while we're there, obviously Sydney's gone through some of the biggest planning changes in decades, and, it has created a lot of anxiety to the city, depending on, where you live, and opportunity for some, fears for others, I guess. The Kurungai sort of, council, the sort of, you're seeing a lot of change, I guess, particularly around sort of that northern train line. How are you how's that changed your role, and how's it, decision-making with clients?
So for us, we really have to be the advisor, the trusted advisor, first and foremost. And then it's about understanding what's going to be happening in that particular area. Lots of people still want to be in close proximity to the train. So it comes with the territory that there's going to be redevelopment, and whether it's something that is important to someone or not in terms of the walkability to the train is what's going to determine whether we buy in close proximity. For other people, it's they want to be very far away, in the sense that they want to stay in the suburb, but they don't want to be affected by any redevelopment. So how I look at it from a buyer's agent perspective is not only looking at their scenario right now, but in 5 to 10 years' time, if their kids need to catch the train, it's important that they can walk to the train station. So it's a balancing act. It's really about looking at the scale and seeing what's important for now and what's going to impact their lifestyle.
Yeah, I constantly drive through the Upper North Shore because I live on the beaches, and we're whether we're going up north to Newcastle to see my family or just escaping for the weekend. And when you think about people who are from there, what's some of the things that they kind of catch them out, sort of, whether it's rat runs or black spots or hard to get around or, the land? Like, what's some of the things that, a lot of buyers just don't know what they don't know, and all of a sudden they're potentially pursuing the wrong opportunity?
So a lot of buyers are not aware of a bushfire zone. So I'm going to change a little bit more. And it's really for them to understand that if they want to renovate a property, knock down, rebuild, the costs associated with that are significantly higher. So I think that's one thing that we really need to educate a buyer on. We have lots of buyers that want their bush aspect. They love the feel of being out in the bush. They don't understand what comes with it. Then there's a lot of hidden surprises, and it can be a costly exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm gone through that myself, backing onto a national park and all your bow ratings and what you got to do. It's, it can absolutely change what you think's a cheap reno to an expensive one. If you think about sort of the structure of sort of the upper North Shore, and there's lots of different cultures, a lot of family wealth. What sort of, how does that factor in? Whether it's buyer preferences today, but also thinking through when you sell it one day.
So I think it's about understanding, explaining to the clients that there's diversification in the areas and that the communities have changed. One of the things that I find very important when looking to buy a property is for buyers that are coming in, particularly those that are moving from either the eastern suburbs or the inner west, and culturally aren't quite sure about what the area is all about, is I always say we need to spend a bit of time together in the area, not just on a Saturday, but on a Sunday. You need to go to local cafes, to the parks. You need to have a look at the community centres. And also what's important, is sports important to you? Understand the sporting teams that there are there. Education is so important because every family has different values, and there's a lot of people that are migrants that come to Australia as well that are not familiar with other cultural requirements. So it can be quite fun too. I think that's very important. And it's about making a buyer feel not pressured into learning new things, but it's about making them understand whether this is the suburb they want to live in. And on the Upper North Shore, there's lots of different pockets that offer different things. So there are some pockets that are culturally a little bit more, culturally you have one group of cultured, how do I put it? So there's one group of demographic of people than other areas. So I think that it's just making people feel comfortable with their next move.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just, knowing the market you're operating in, right? And your future seller, one day it might be you, it might be someone like you, it might be a different culture, and, they're all going to value different things. And when you think about the Upper North Shore, it's, you can cover quite a lot of ground, right? Like it's, very leafy, probably the leafiest part of Sydney. I mean, I love that personally, but there's lots of different sort of micro sort of villages, I guess you probably call it. How do you sort of take people on a bit of a journey, and what's some of the areas that often they get quite surprised by, and they weren't considering that pocket, but now all of a sudden you brought it onto their radar?
Yeah, so it's such a good question. That there's West Pymble, for example, that has changed so much. But if you would have asked me that question 15, 20 years ago, a lot of buyers would say, I don't really want to be in West Pymble because it's nowhere. However, today there is a little village there. The cafes are great. The homes have been redeveloped into beautiful homes. So it's got a really nice feel to it. South Turramurra is also changing as well. So it's the little sister that I call them the little sister pockets that are becoming very appealing, not only from a price perspective, but also the communities within those areas. St Ives is an area that has grown substantially. It's changed a lot over the years. The house prices have grown phenomenally in that area. I personally lived in St Ives for many years. I loved it as a suburb. So I think it's really about not just focusing on the main suburbs that everybody understands, and looking at budget is a very important thing, because that's what's going to drive what you can buy. So having a look at the budget and then the lifestyle factors, we then look into all the different aspects of what's important to the clients. Something else I might add is that, like, culturally, at the moment there's talk about potentially the Marion Street Theatre in Killara not going to be there for much longer, which is quite sad. So the community are quite up in arms and trying to save that. We've also got the Roseville Cinema as well, which is another one that potentially could be changing. So I think it's about trying to keep the culture in the suburbs and identify areas that are going to be working for people's needs.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're right. Exactly. It's kind of understanding your budget, your sort of values, and going on a bit of a journey. I do find that sometimes you just don't know. You just know what you know, and you know what you don't know often, and you sort of got to go on a bit of a journey. How's that sort of shifted? I mean, you've obviously been a buyer's agent for a long time. To COVID, sort of work from home. Everyone wanted to be close to the train line. How has that sort of also, brought up a lot of these different pockets and then allowed them to sort of gentrify? How's that sort of changed buyer briefs, I guess, from you?
Yeah, so it's certainly changed buyer briefs, and it's changed the landscape. So like suburbs like West Pymble, as I mentioned, or South Turramurra, that are not close to train stations, St Ives, that allowed people to work from home and buy into those areas. And in some of those suburbs, you've got bigger land as well. So for them, it's a lifestyle factor. What I'm finding now is more and more people are wanting wellness spaces in their homes. So living in those suburbs allows you to have your sauna at home, to have the home gym. I mean, the home gym has been around for a long time, but it's becoming more and more prominent that people want that. And so that's one of the things with the Upper North Shore. You can have the space for that. Even I've got clients that have built a putting green. So COVID brought about that, a basketball court on their properties. So it's given them the opportunities to move a little bit further out from the station, but have the other lifestyle factors and still be able to work from home.
Yeah, it's kind of got that nice, for affordable price compared to comparable other parts where you get a bit more usable sort of land and a bit more land, right? Than if you say went a bit closer to the city or a bit closer to the beach. And, someone who wants that type of that lifestyle, it's sort of that pocket, right? When you think about where people go wrong, though, the land can be quite undulating. You definitely get like rat runs, I find, and, it can get quite clogged up with traffic at certain times. So how do you what's some of the mistakes that people, whether it's even through trees and where you find that, people maybe pursue the wrong properties that they just haven't thought through, the locals would be maybe devaluing for that, or they don't want to be near that, thing, for example?
I think there's certain streets in certain suburbs where the houses are significantly cheaper and people buying in think, oh, I'm getting a bargain. But in reality, there's a lot of factors that are not appealing at all. So the terrain, that's never going to change. There are some spots where there's lots of mould. Flooding can happen as well. I feel that from the perspective of the mould aspect, that could be a very expensive exercise, and also on your health too. What's cheap is expensive. And I always say prevention is better than cure. And that's one thing that a buyer's agent or a good experienced buyer's agent will be able to guide you through the process and the streets of which are a no-go zone. There's lots of streets in the suburbs that I feel will give you a lifestyle that you don't want to encounter. So, that's a big thing. There genuinely are a lot of homes with mould, termites as well. I know in today's case, most people do get a building and pest report, but there are lots of people that go in there and just buy. They don't do the correct due diligence. That's another very expensive mistake in terms of termite damage. There's a lot of termites or past termites on the Upper North Shore. So I think that when something looks too good to be true, it's not that good.
Yeah, I mean, I've just sort of, you've got a little different client briefs over the years that have popped up, and I think you're right. I mean, naturally, particularly, maybe not so much in this type of market we're in now, a little bit more, not as much urgency and FOMO and desire to transact. If you don't buy now, then you're going to miss out. But in those hotter markets, you're right. Like price points are hard, everyone's pushing, and, like you say, there's something just seems to be a bit too good to be true. It's their way to access the market. And a few years down the line, oh God, there is termites here. Oh, there is mold. And I think it's really trying to dodge those bullets a little bit if you can. I think that's where a great buyer's agent, adds a lot of value. I mean, trees and aspect, and that's something. I mean, trees are great for keeping it cooler, but they do sort of hide the sun as well. So
They do.
how do you sort of make sure that people, really think through, they know what they're buying and they're going to enjoy the life of actually living in that property?
So I think, when you talk about trees, the other important factor is for people to understand that you can't just go and knock down a tree. So there's a lot of protected trees on the Upper North Shore, and understanding that if you don't have the right aspect, it's going to be cold and damp, and you can't get rid of that tree. That's, blocking the sunshine into your beautiful home. So the house could aesthetically look amazing at first, but over time you learn to understand that it's not that amazing.
The relationships with agents, I mean, I do think it takes years to build any relationship. How does that really help you now? I mean, obviously being a local and, being around for a while, but like, how does that sort of help you, give you a bit of an advantage of, say, just a general buyer off the street or a new to industry buyer's agent that's, just learning the trade?
I think firstly, they understand that the buyers that we're working with are very motivated and qualified buyers. So the Upper North Shore is still, although the market has had a bit of a turn and it's quieter, it's still very popular, and there's some good buying. So the number of buyers that are coming through have not decreased substantially. So in other words, it helps us. It gives us an advantage because they will prioritize us over other buyers. And also from a perspective of a buyer looking for something that's really niche, the agents will help us find those properties. They will go back, speak to vendors that they've spoken to over the last 18 to 24 months and see whether we could bring through a qualified buyer. So there is still a lot of off-market activity happening, but true off-markets, not the off-markets whereby the agents are sending the emails across to their whole database. So that is a big advantage that we have. And particularly my whole team, I would say, that work across New South Wales, we have that advantage for our clients.
Yeah, it's sort of the ones who want a sale, but they don't want to list it. They don't want to damage their digital real estate. They want the privacy, or they just, and agents don't want to get through everyone through the properties, right? So they want to be highly selective on who they let through. And I think the top buyers agents get that. When you think about the Upper North Shore, about what's some of the sort of lifestyle, I mentioned schools, but just some other things that, people didn't realize that a lot of people go there on weekends, or they're just a real lifestyle benefit. I'm thinking Lane Cove National Park as an example, but what are some of the things that pop up that people are like, wow, that's a hidden gem that, I just love. It just really adds a lot of value to the area that people are surprised by, and then they end up, wanting to be closer to that and as a value in doing so.
So the bush walks, that's very, very surprising to a lot of people because there's lots of bush walks. The marina, Bobbin Head Marina, a lot of people that live on the Upper North Shore love boating. So for them, that's a hidden gem. The cafes, there's some great cafes. There's great restaurants on the Upper North Shore as well. So I think the combination of lifestyle factors and the social aspect is very important.
Yeah. So and do you find that the walking to the shops is, because you can sort of have a car life, and you finding that's becoming more and more important for people, is in terms of the ability just to sort of walk to the shops and within their community, that maybe they weren't as focused on that, say, 5 years ago?
Absolutely. So Linfield, and that's a suburb, that's where I live, in Linfield. To be able to walk to the local shops and the cafes is fabulous. And a lot of people, not only the downsizers that want that, there's a lot of families that want that because you can walk to the train station. And so that's a different, well, when I say different, that's another aspect as to why the North Shore is so diversified, because there's the Upper North Shore, then you've got Linfield, which is part of the Upper North Shore, but then Roseville going into a little bit mid-North Shore, I would say. So that's another area that I would consider being a suburb, which is close proximity to the city, but also you feel the North Shore vibe.
You've got a, I'm not sure how many buyers agents you've got within your team now, but how does that help you with a group? You know, obviously there's you spent the years maybe just by yourself or maybe with a couple of support, but now that you've sort of grown to, a few people in your team, how does that help you sort of, get better results for clients?
So we collaborate together. So in most cases, every client will have a team working on their brief. And so we, depending on the areas, depending on the type of client, we look at the areas of expertise that each team member has, and then we'll decide who's going to work on which client and where the support is necessary.
Yeah, I think there's, you've got to cover a lot of ground. There's a lot of people, a lot of knowledge, a lot of agent relationships. And I think, I think if I was running a buyer's agency, I think the power of a team is, really valuable. Particularly when you've got to you got to explore all different opportunities, right? And sort of work relationships to sort of uncover that. How are you sort of finding that, maybe the multi-generation, or you mentioned downsizers, but, the people maybe wouldn't have realized that that's such a big driver of values there that maybe they, in other parts of Sydney, it's not as driven by that as much.
So multi-generational is very big on the Upper North Shore, particularly the Wahroonga area, Pymble. We're finding that there are the families that have the grandparents right down to the grandkids living in the same home. So when a client comes to me and says to me, we want to build a house, the first thing that I say to them, it's very important if it's going to be a double-story house, is they need to have a master bedroom with an ensuite on the ground floor to accommodate for the multi-generational families, because that is becoming more and more popular. And I think over time, we're going to be seeing that move across New South Wales, not just on the Upper North Shore.
Brady, it's been a really good chat today. I think, I love this. You're super experienced, the sales backgrounds, and also now team. I think you'd be in very safe hands, and even just mutual client bought last week who couldn't rave about your service anymore. So I appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thanks so much for listening today. We hope you got lots of value out of it. If you'd like to speak to our guest today, there's links in the show notes on how you can get in contact. And if you're buying your first home, upgrading, renovating, or need any finance-related queries, obviously we'd love to help. There's links in the show notes to us as a mortgage broker, and we look forward to next week's episode.